5 years after the divorce, Ethan Walker walked into a jewelry store to buy an engagement ring for his new girlfriend. He believed he had moved on, that the past was nothing more than a faded memory. But when he reached the counter, the woman standing behind the register made his heart stop. It was Claire, his ex-wife, the woman who had once accepted a cheap ring from him and still chose to stay. Now, when he could finally afford anything, they were no longer married. Some feelings, he realized, never truly disappear. The jewelry store was nearly empty when Ethan walked in. The lighting was soft and controlled, designed to make diamonds look flawless. Everything gleamed under the glass counters. The air smelled faintly of leather and expensive perfume. It was the kind of place he used to avoid. Back when checking his bank account before buying groceries was a weekly habit. Now he could walk in without flinching at the prices. His business had grown steadily over the past 3 years. He had a house with a backyard. His daughter had her own room, painted the color she wanted. He could afford to take time off without panic. And tonight, he was here to buy an engagement ring for the woman he had been dating for nearly a year. She was kind, patient, good with his daughter. She made him feel like he could start over without guilt. He moved slowly along the display cases, studying the rings under the lights. There were solitaires, halos, vintage settings. He had done his research. He knew what cut she liked, what metal she preferred. He wanted something timeless, something she would not grow tired of. The sales associate hovered nearby, polite but distant, waiting for him to signal when he needed help. Ethan stopped in front of a ring that caught his attention. The diamond was clear and bright, set in white gold with a thin band. It was elegant without being excessive. It looked like the kind of ring someone would choose carefully, thoughtfully. He pointed to it, and the associate unlocked the case, placing it gently on a velvet tray in front of him. He picked it up, turned it under the light. It felt solid, real. He imagined slipping it onto her finger, the way her face would change when she realized what he was asking. She deserved this. She deserved someone who could offer her stability, who would not disappear into his own stress and exhaustion. Someone who had learned how to be present. The associate smiled at him and asked if he would like to see it sized. Ethan nodded. He glanced at the price tag one more time, then told her he would take it. She congratulated him warmly, as if she had known him for years, and said she would prepare the paperwork at the front counter. He followed her toward the register, the ring box tucked carefully in his jacket pocket. That was when he saw her. Claire was standing behind the counter, her back turned slightly as she sorted through a drawer of invoices. Her hair was shorter now, just past her shoulders, and she wore a simple black blouse with a name tag pinned to the collar. She had not noticed him yet. For a moment, Ethan thought about turning around, pretending he had forgotten something, anything to avoid this. But his feet stayed planted where they were. The associate called out to her, asking her to process a sale. Claire looked up, and her eyes met his. Her expression did not change immediately. It took a second, maybe 2, for recognition to settle in. Then her face went still. Not cold, not angry, just very, very still. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He had not seen her in over 2 years. Not since the final custody hearing, where they had sat on opposite sides of a courtroom and agreed to share weekends and holidays. They had been polite then, distant in the way people are when they have run out of things to say to each other. He had assumed they would never cross paths again unless their daughter's school forced them into the same room. But here she was, and here he was. And between them, in his jacket pocket, was a ring meant for someone else. Claire recovered first. She stepped up to the register and gave him a professional smile, the kind she probably used with every customer. Her voice was steady when she spoke. "Good evening. Did you find everything you were looking for?" Ethan nodded. He did not trust his voice yet. He pulled the ring box from his pocket and placed it on the counter. Claire glanced down at it, and something flickered across her face before she smoothed it away. She picked up the box, opened it briefly to verify the item, then closed it again. Her fingers moved efficiently over the keyboard as she entered the information into the system. "This is a beautiful choice," she said quietly. Her tone was neutral, but he could hear the weight underneath it. He wanted to say something. Anything. But what was there to say? That he had not known she worked here? That he would have gone somewhere else if he had? That seeing her again made him feel like he was standing on the edge of something he could not name? Instead, he just said, "Thank you." Claire printed the receipt and slid it across the counter toward him. She did not look at him directly now. Her eyes stayed on the screen, on the receipt, on anything but his face. Ethan signed the slip and handed it back. She processed the payment without a word. As she placed the ring box into a small branded bag, Ethan found himself staring at her hands. They were the same hands that had once held his, that had wiped away his daughter's tears, that had worked double shifts at a diner while he tried to get his business off the ground. He remembered the night he had proposed to her, more than a decade ago. He had saved for months to buy a ring. But even then, it had been modest, a thin silver band with a small stone that he had been embarrassed to present. But Claire had not cared. She had looked at the ring, then at him, and smiled in a way that made him believe they could survive anything. She had said something he had never forgotten. "I'm not marrying the ring. I'm marrying you." He had believed her, and for a while, it had been true. They had been happy, even when money was tight, even when the apartment was too small and the car kept breaking down. They had each other, and they had their daughter, and that had felt like enough. But somewhere along the way, it had stopped being enough. The stress had built up slowly, like water damage behind a wall. He had worked longer hours, taken on more clients, tried to prove he could provide. She had taken extra shifts, managed the household, raised their daughter mostly on her own. They had stopped talking about anything that mattered. They had stopped looking at each other the way they used to. And then, one day, she had told him she could not do it anymore. Not the marriage, not the pretending. She had been calm when she said it, almost too calm, like she had rehearsed it in her head 100 times. He had not fought her. He had been too tired to fight. So they had signed the papers, divided their belongings, and moved into separate lives. Now, standing in this jewelry store with a ring for another woman, Ethan realized something he had been trying not to think about for years. He had moved on, but he had never truly let go. Claire handed him the bag. Her fingers brushed his for just a second, and the contact felt like an electric shock. She pulled her hand back quickly, as if she had felt it too. "Congratulations," she said softly. There was no bitterness in her voice, just a quiet sadness that made his throat ache. Ethan took the bag. He should have walked away. He should have thanked her one more time and left without looking back. But instead, he stood there, holding the bag like it weighed 100 pounds. "Claire," he said. She finally looked at him. Really looked at him. Her eyes were the same deep brown they had always been, but there was something different in them now. Something older. Something worn down by time and disappointment. "I didn't know you worked here," he said. "I didn't know you were getting married," she replied. The words hung between them, fragile and sharp at the same time. Ethan wanted to explain. To tell her that it was not what it looked like, that he was just trying to build a life that made sense. But he knew it would sound hollow. She did not owe him an explanation, and he did not owe her one either. They were strangers now, bound only by a daughter they both loved and a past they could not erase. "I hope she makes you happy," Claire said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of everything they had never said to each other. Ethan nodded. He did not know what else to do. He turned and walked toward the door, the bag clutched tightly in his hand. Behind him, he heard the soft sound of Claire returning to her work, the faint clicking of the keyboard, the rustle of paper. When he stepped outside, the cool night air hit his face like a slap. He stood on the sidewalk for a long time, staring at the glowing storefront, at the silhouette of the woman inside. The woman who had once believed in him when he had nothing. The woman who had worn that cheap ring without complaint. The woman he had lost, not because either of them had done something terrible, but because they had both stopped trying. He looked down at the bag in his hand. Inside was a ring worth more than he used to make in 3 months. A ring for a future he was trying to build. But all he could think about was the past he had walked away from, and the question he could not answer. Had he really moved on? Or had he just learned how to pretend? Ethan did not leave right away. He stood outside the store for several minutes, the bag still in his hand, his breath visible in the cold air. Through the glass, he could see Claire moving behind the counter, her figure small and distant under the store's warm lighting. She was organizing something, her movements precise and controlled. She had always been like that, calm on the surface, even when everything underneath was falling apart. He turned away and started walking toward his car, but his feet slowed before he reached it. Something inside him refused to let the moment end so easily. He had spent 5 years avoiding this exact situation, convincing himself that running into her would not matter, that enough time had passed for them to be strangers. But now that it had happened, he realized how wrong he had been. He stood by the driver's side door, keys in hand, and stared at nothing. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from his girlfriend asking how the ring shopping had gone. He did not open it. He could not bring himself to type out a cheerful response while his chest still felt tight, and his mind was somewhere else entirely. Inside the store, Claire had finished organizing the invoices. She glanced toward the front window and saw him standing there, his back to the glass. She looked away quickly, as if the sight of him caused physical discomfort. She had known this moment might come eventually. The city was not that big, and they still shared custody of their daughter. But knowing it could happen and actually living through it were two very different things. She had thought she was prepared. She had rehearsed in her head what she would say if they ever crossed paths again. She would be polite, professional, unbothered. She would prove to him and to herself that she had moved on. But the moment she saw him walk up to the counter with that ring box, all of her rehearsed composure crumbled. She had recognized the ring immediately. It was one of the more expensive pieces in the store, the kind of ring someone bought when they were serious, when they had the resources to back up their commitment. It was nothing like the ring he had given her all those years ago. That one had cost less than $200, and the band had started to tarnish within a year. But she had loved it anyway, because it had meant something. It had been a promise, made when neither of them had anything to offer except themselves. Now, he had everything. A successful business, financial stability, the ability to walk into a jewelry store and buy a ring without hesitation. And she was standing behind a counter, scanning barcodes and processing payments for people who had the kind of life she used to dream about. She hated that it hurt. She hated that seeing him again made her feel like she was 25 and hopeful instead of 35 and exhausted. She hated that part of her still wanted to know if he ever thought about her, if he ever regretted the way things had ended, if he ever lay awake at night wondering what they could have been if they had just tried a little harder. But she knew better than to ask. Some doors were better left closed. Ethan finally opened his car door and sat down, but he did not start the engine. He placed the bag on the passenger seat and stared at it like it was something dangerous. His hands rested on the steering wheel, but they did not move. He thought about his girlfriend waiting for him at home, probably making dinner, probably excited to hear about his evening. She deserved better than this. She deserved someone who was fully present, not someone haunted by a woman he had let go of years ago. But he could not shake the image of Claire standing behind that counter, her face carefully blank, her voice so steady it almost sounded rehearsed. She had looked at the ring and congratulated him, and it had felt like the cruelest thing she could have done. Not because she was being mean, but because she was being kind, because she was letting him go, the same way she had let him go 5 years ago when she told him their marriage was over. He pulled out his phone and stared at the screen. His girlfriend's message was still unopened. He typed out a reply, something short and vague, then deleted it. He tried again, but the words felt hollow. Finally, he just typed, "Still at the store. Be home soon." It was not a lie, but it was not the truth either. Inside the jewelry store, Claire's co-worker approached her, a young woman named Madison who had only been working there for a few months. She was holding a velvet tray with several bracelets on it, the kind of delicate pieces that customers often bought as anniversary gifts. "Hey, can you help me with this order? The customer wants to see these before deciding," Madison said. Claire nodded and followed her to the display case, but her mind was somewhere else. She kept thinking about the way Ethan had looked at her, like he wanted to say something but could not find the words. She wondered if he had noticed how much weight she had lost, or how tired she looked, or if he even cared anymore. As she helped Madison arrange the bracelets on the counter, her eyes drifted toward the display case near the register. There was a bracelet there, silver with a small turquoise stone, simple and understated. She had noticed it the first week she started working at the store. It reminded her of something she used to own years ago, before she had sold most of her jewelry to help pay for their daughter's preschool tuition. She had walked past that bracelet every day for months, always stopping to look at it for just a second, before moving on. It was not expensive, not compared to the other items in the store, but it was still more than she could justify spending on herself. She had bills to pay, groceries to buy, a daughter to support. There was no room in her budget for something frivolous. But sometimes, late at night when the store was empty and she was closing up alone, she would take the bracelet out of the case and hold it in her hand, just to see what it felt like. She would slip it onto her wrist and imagine a version of herself who had the kind of life where buying something beautiful for no reason was not a luxury. Then she would put it back, lock the case, and go home. Ethan finally started the car. He sat there for a moment longer, then put it in reverse and pulled out of the parking spot. But instead of heading toward the exit, he circled back around and parked again, this time closer to the front entrance. He told himself he was being ridiculous. He told himself there was no reason to go back inside, but his hands were already reaching for the door handle. When he walked back into the store, Claire looked up from the display case. Her expression shifted slightly, surprise flickering across her face before she controlled it. Madison glanced between them, sensing something, but not understanding what. Ethan approached the counter slowly. He did not have a plan. He only knew that leaving without saying something real felt wrong. Claire straightened, her hands resting on the glass countertop, waiting. "I forgot something," Ethan said. His voice was quieter than he intended. Claire tilted her head slightly, not quite understanding. Madison excused herself and disappeared into the back room, leaving them alone. Ethan looked around the store, his eyes scanning the displays until they landed on the bracelet Claire had been staring at earlier. He did not know why he noticed it. Maybe because it was close to where she was standing. Or maybe because something about it felt familiar, like he had seen her wear something similar a long time ago. He pointed to it and said, "Can I see that one?" Claire followed his gaze and felt her stomach drop. She did not move at first, as if moving would make this moment more real. Then she unlocked the case and took out the bracelet, placing it carefully on the counter between them. Ethan picked it up, turning it over in his hand. The turquoise stone caught the light, glowing softly. It was simple, unpretentious, the kind of thing Claire would have chosen for herself. "I'll take this too," he said. Claire's throat tightened. She knew exactly what he was doing, and it made her want to scream. She did not want his pity. She did not want him to buy her something out of guilt or nostalgia or whatever complicated emotion was driving this decision. She wanted him to leave, to take his expensive engagement ring and his new life, and go be happy somewhere far away from her. But instead of saying any of that, she just processed the transaction. She wrapped the bracelet in tissue paper, placed it in a small bag, and handed it to him. Her hands were steady, but her heart was racing. Ethan took the bag, then slid it across the counter back toward her. His eyes met hers, and for the first time that night, he let himself be vulnerable. "This is for you," he said quietly. Claire stared at the bag like it was something dangerous. She shook her head slowly and pushed it back toward him. "I can't accept this," she said. Her voice was firm, but there was a tremor underneath it. Ethan did not take it back. He just stood there, his hands resting on the counter, his expression unreadable. "Why not?" he asked. Claire let out a small, bitter laugh. She looked down at the bag, then back up at him, and for the first time that night, her careful composure cracked. "Because you're about to marry someone else, Ethan. Because this..." She gestured at the bag, at the space between them, at everything they were not saying. "This doesn't mean anything anymore." Ethan flinched. He wanted to argue, to tell her that it did mean something, that seeing her again had shaken something loose inside him that he had been trying to bury for years. But he could not find the words, so he just stood there, silent and heavy with regret. Claire picked up the bag and held it out to him, her hand steady now, her expression hardening into something distant and unreachable. "Go home, Ethan," she said softly. "Go home to your fiancée. Give her the life you couldn't give me. That's what you're supposed to do now." The words landed like a punch to the chest. Ethan took the bag from her, his fingers brushing hers one last time. He wanted to say something, to apologize, to explain, to do anything that might ease the weight of this moment. But there was nothing left to say that would not make things worse. He stepped back from the counter, the two bags now in his hands, one for the future and one for the past. Claire watched him go, her face carefully blank again, her hands folded neatly in front of her. But just as he reached the door, she spoke. Her voice was quiet, almost too quiet to hear, but it stopped him in his tracks. "Just promise me one thing." Ethan turned back to face her. She was not looking at him anymore. Her eyes were fixed on the counter, on the empty space where the bracelet had been. "Promise me you'll give your daughter the kind of mother she deserves," Claire said. Her voice was steady, but there was a crack in it now, something raw and unguarded. "Someone who'll be there for her in ways I couldn't? Someone who won't have to work 3 jobs just to keep the lights on? Someone who can actually be present?" Ethan felt his chest tighten. He wanted to tell her that she had been enough, that their daughter loved her, that the sacrifices she had made were not failures. But before he could speak, Claire looked up at him, and her eyes were filled with something that made his words die in his throat. It was not anger. It was not bitterness. It was grief. Pure, unfiltered grief for the life they could not build together, for the woman she could not be while carrying the weight of their struggles alone, for the love that had not been enough to survive reality. "That's all I want," she said quietly. "Just give her that. And then we're even." Ethan stood frozen in the doorway, the bags clutched tightly in his hands. He wanted to go back, to tell her she was wrong, to make her understand that she had given their daughter more than she knew. But he could see in her eyes that she would not believe him. She had already made peace with her version of the story, the one where she wasn't enough, where leaving had been the only kind thing left to do. So he nodded. It was all he could offer her, a silent promise that he would try, that he would do better, that he would not let their daughter grow up thinking love was supposed to hurt this much. Then he walked out into the night, leaving Claire standing alone behind the counter, her hands pressed flat against the glass, her reflection staring back at her in the darkened window. Ethan sat in his car for a long time after leaving the store. The engine was running, but he had not put it in gear. The two bags sat on the passenger seat beside him, one containing the engagement ring, the other holding the bracelet Claire had refused to accept. He stared at them both, unable to reconcile what they represented. One was supposed to be his future. The other was a ghost he could not bury. He thought about driving home, walking through the door, and acting like everything was normal. His girlfriend would ask about the ring, her eyes bright with hope and excitement. She would want to see it, maybe even try it on just to get a sense of what it would feel like. And he would have to smile and pretend that his heart was not somewhere else, trapped in a jewelry store with a woman who had once believed in him when no one else did. But he could not do it. Not tonight. Not like this. He picked up his phone and typed out a message, his fingers moving slowly across the screen. Something came up with work. Going to be late? Don't wait up. It was vague enough to be believable, distant enough to buy him time. He sent it before he could second-guess himself, then turned off his phone and placed it in the glove compartment. He drove without a destination, letting the city streets guide him. The roads were mostly empty at this hour, just the occasional car passing by, headlights cutting through the darkness. He passed familiar landmarks, places he used to go with Claire back when they were still figuring out who they were and what they wanted. The diner where they used to eat breakfast on Sundays, the park where they had their first real argument, the hospital where their daughter was born. He had not thought about these places in years. He had trained himself not to. Moving forward had required letting go of the details, the small memories that used to define his life. But tonight, they all came rushing back, uninvited and overwhelming. He pulled into the parking lot of the park and turned off the engine. The swings swayed gently in the breeze, their chains creaking softly. He remembered bringing their daughter here when she was 3. How Claire would push her on the swings while he sat on the bench and watched, exhausted from another long week of work. Claire had always been the one who showed up, the one who made sure their daughter felt loved even when everything else was falling apart. And he had taken that for granted. He had thought that as long as he was providing, as long as he was building something stable, that would be enough. But it had not been. Claire had needed a partner, not a paycheck. And by the time he realized that, it was too late. He got out of the car and walked toward the swings, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. The air was cold, sharp against his skin, but he barely noticed. He sat down on one of the swings, the metal chains cold under his grip, and let himself remember. He remembered the night Claire told him she wanted a divorce. They had been sitting at the kitchen table, their daughter asleep in the next room. Claire had been calm, almost detached, like she had already mourned the relationship in private and was now just delivering the news. She had told him she could not do it anymore, that she felt like she was drowning, that she needed to save herself before there was nothing left to save. He had not known what to say. Part of him had wanted to fight for her, to beg her to stay, to promise he would do better. But another part of him had known she was right. They had stopped being a team a long time ago. They had become two people living separate lives under the same roof, held together only by their daughter and a sense of obligation. So he had agreed. They had divided their lives with the same efficiency they used to divide household chores. She took the apartment. He found a smaller place closer to work. They set up a custody schedule that was fair and reasonable, and they had both moved on. Or at least they had tried to. But sitting here now, in this park, where they used to bring their daughter, Ethan realized he had never truly moved on. He had just buried his feelings under layers of work and routine, and the hope that someone new could make him forget. But feelings do not disappear just because you ignore them. They wait, patient and persistent, until something forces you to face them. His phone buzzed in the glove compartment, but he did not go back to check it. He already knew what it would say. His girlfriend was worried, or confused, or both, and he did not have the words to explain what he was going through, because he did not fully understand it himself. After a while, he stood up and walked back to his car. He sat in the driver's seat and stared at the 2 bags on the passenger seat. The engagement ring was supposed to represent a fresh start, a life free from the mistakes of the past. But now, it just felt like a lie. Not because he did not care about his girlfriend, but because he had been fooling himself into thinking he could build something new without first making peace with what he had lost. He picked up the bag with the bracelet and held it in his hands. Claire had refused it, had told him to go home and give his daughter the life she deserved. But what she had not said, what he could see in her eyes, was that she believed she had failed. That she thought walking away had been a failure instead of an act of survival. And he hated that. He hated that she carried that weight. That she had convinced herself she wasn't enough, when the truth was that she had been more than enough. She had been everything. She had held their family together with sheer will and determination, even when he was too consumed by his own stress to see it. He wanted to go back to the store, to tell her all of this, to make her understand that she had not failed anyone. But he knew she would not believe him. Some wounds run too deep to be healed with words, no matter how sincere. So instead, he made a different decision. He would not go back. He would not try to fix the past or rewrite the story. He would let her go, truly and completely, the way he should have done 5 years ago. Not with resentment or regret, but with gratitude. Because she had given him something precious, even if their marriage had not lasted. She had shown him what it meant to love someone without conditions, to choose someone even when choosing them was hard, and that was something he would carry with him, whether or not he ever saw her again. He started the car and drove home. The streets were quieter now, the city settling into the stillness of late evening. When he pulled into his driveway, he saw the lights on in the living room. His girlfriend was still awake, probably worried, probably waiting for an explanation. He took the engagement ring with him, but left the bracelet in the car. He would figure out what to do with it later. Maybe he would donate it, or give it to his daughter when she was older, along with a story about the woman who had loved them both, even when it had cost her everything. When he walked through the door, his girlfriend looked up from the couch. She had been reading a book, but she set it aside when she saw him. Her expression was a mix of concern and relief. "Hey," she said softly. "Is everything okay?" Ethan set the bag with the ring on the coffee table and sat down beside her. He did not know how to explain what had happened, or even if he should, but he knew he owed her honesty, even if it was incomplete. "I ran into my ex-wife tonight," he said. His voice was steady, but his hands were not. "At the jewelry store." His girlfriend's eyes widened slightly, but she did not say anything. She just waited, giving him space to continue. "It was unexpected," Ethan said. He looked down at his hands, then back up at her. "And it made me realize some things I've been avoiding." She reached out and took his hand, her grip warm and steady. She did not press him for details, did not demand explanations. She just listened, the way she always did. "I care about you," Ethan said. "I want to build a life with you, but I need to be honest about where I am right now. I thought I had moved on, but seeing her again made me realize I've been carrying more than I thought." His girlfriend nodded slowly. She looked at the bag on the coffee table, then back at him. "Do you still love her?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, but there was no accusation in it. just a need to understand. Ethan thought about the question. He thought about Claire standing behind that counter, her face carefully blank, her hands steady even as her world crumbled around her. He thought about the life they had built together, the life that had fallen apart despite their best efforts. "I love who we were," he said finally. "But that's not the same as loving who we are now. We're different people. And I think I've been holding on to a memory instead of letting myself fully live in the present." His girlfriend squeezed his hand. She looked relieved, but also sad, like she understood exactly what he meant. "So what do you want to do?" she asked. Ethan looked at the bag on the table, then back at her. He realized in that moment that he did not have all the answers. But he had something more important. He had clarity. He knew that moving forward was not about forgetting the past or pretending it did not matter. It was about honoring what had been, learning from it, and choosing to build something new without the weight of unresolved grief. "I want to be here," he said, "with you. But I need some time to work through this, to make peace with what happened, so I can show up for you the way you deserve." She nodded, her eyes soft with understanding. She leaned in and kissed his forehead, a gesture so tender it made his chest ache. "Take the time you need," she said. "I'm not going anywhere." Ethan closed his eyes and let himself breathe. For the first time in hours, the tightness in his chest began to ease. He did not know what the future would look like, or if he would ever fully let go of the past. But he knew one thing for certain. Not everyone who walks with you reaches the end of the road. But the people who stood beside you when you had nothing, who chose you even when choosing you was hard, deserve to be remembered with gratitude, not regret. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is letting them go, not with bitterness, but with grace. Ethan opened his eyes and looked at the woman sitting beside him. She was patient, kind, willing to wait while he figured himself out. And he realized that maybe, just maybe, he could learn to love her the way she deserved, not as a replacement for what he had lost, but as someone entirely her own. The engagement ring could wait. For now, he just needed to be present, to sit in the discomfort, to honor the past, and to trust that the future would unfold the way it was meant to. And somewhere across the city, in a quiet jewelry store, Claire locked the door and turned off the lights. She walked to her car, her reflection faint in the darkened windows, and drove home to a daughter who was waiting for her. She did not think about Ethan, or the ring, or the life they could have had. She just thought about tomorrow, and the day after that, and all the small, quiet moments that made up a life, because that was all anyone could do. Keep moving forward, one step at a time, and trust that the weight would eventually lighten. Not every love story ends with forever, but every love story, even the ones that fall apart, leaves something behind. A lesson, a memory, a reminder that once, for a brief and beautiful moment, two people chose each other. And that, in its own way, was enough.